Hello, and welcome to the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Roundtable, presented by Star Trek Fleet Command, available for free on Windows PC, Android, and iOS. You just got a look at a brand new trailer for the Star Trek Fleet Command Deep Space Nine expansion, which is available now through January. Additionally, new content will be made available every single month through the end of the year. In Star Trek Fleet Command, you can customize your own fleet, explore new worlds, and dominate the galaxy. Meanwhile, the show Star Trek Deep Space Nine is celebrating its 30th anniversary in just a few months, and for many fans, it remains the Star Trek show to beat. It explored themes from religion to war to the question of what actually constitutes good or evil, and it did so while also breaking barriers on TV. All, of course, through the stories of the amazing characters. Speaking of which, we're thrilled to have three of the actors who have brought those characters to life with us today. Join me in welcoming Bajoran freedom fighter turned second in command of the space station, Kira Nerys, played by the one and only Nana Visitor.
Thank you so much.
Also joining us is the one and only Chief O'Brien, a Starship Enterprise transfer who could be guaranteed to be rolling up his sleeves and fixing something whenever he wasn't playing darts at Quark's bar, that is. It's Colin Meaney. And last but not least is Jadzia Dax, the brilliant young science officer with 7 lifetimes worth of memories and experiences, courtesy of the alien symbiote inside her. Please welcome Terry Farrell. Welcome, everybody. So to kick things off, why is Deep Space Nine such an important chapter in the Star Trek franchise? Nana, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Well, Star Trek was always about venturing out. And Avery Brooks is the first person that I heard say this, and it is. It's about venturing in. It's about the journey from here to here. It's about relationships and figuring out, even though I wasn't human, it was the most human character I had ever played. And I think that was true for so many of us.
Yeah. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of groundbreaking as well, because it was, you know, the two previous shows, the original and Next Generation, had been ship-based, you know, in other words, voyaging, traveling, and we were on a station. So everything was coming to us. And there was, I think, an initial resistance to that idea. And but it certainly broke new ground, and I think opened the show up to interesting new concepts and ideas.
Yeah. What was it like, Terry, to be part of such an iconic franchise?
Well, at first it was really overwhelming because already knowing about Star Trek and that we were being sort of added on to. But I think the most exciting part about it was knowing that the first, at least for me, the original series, the interracial kiss, the times that they would do shows that were important, you know, social messages that didn't hit you over the head. And what I was told was this is going to be the darkest of the Star Treks, more like the Star Wars of Star Treks. And it made it really exciting, thinking, wow, we're going to break new ground. We're going to be like the first one. And what's really exciting is we were, and we are, because it feels more relevant today. What we told the story 30 years ago is still relevant to what's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's interesting, too, because the show, it's almost like it's got a bigger following now than it did when it debuted, too. People have really grown to love it. Do you guys have any favorite episodes? Like, Nana, can you name, I know there were so many episodes, but can you think of a favorite in particular?
It's always the same answer for me. It's Duet. Harris Yulin did an amazing job in that show. And the writers, it was remarkable. You know, it was made to save money, a bottle show, no big special effects. They'd blown it in the premiere, but it told this ethical story, this moral, interesting story. And it made me really have to get underneath my character to understand how she thought and how she lived and what her belief system was.
Yeah, I love that episode. It also kind of does something that Deep Space Nine did really well, which is it it peels back the idea of what's a villain or not in a way, right? Like, I mean, that the guy that you're going back and forth with, the
Yes.
Cardassian, is like, well, is he a bad guy? Is he not a bad guy? You know, Colin, do you have a favorite episode?
Yeah, I mean, no, there's a lot of them I loved because I think the show, as you said, it was able to address contemporary issues in a way that contemporary shows couldn't. Like we did the episode about homelessness. Remember that? And they were called the Gimmies.
Right.
Gimme, gimme, gimme. I know I didn't have much to do in that episode, but I loved that episode. I really felt it was addressing, in a serious way, but in a very accessible way, a serious social issue.
Terry, what about you? Do you have a favorite pertaining to Dax specifically?
Yes, Rejoined. And again, Abe redirected that as well as he did the Far Beyond the Stars episode. And I think, again, speaking to it, a social awareness of same-sex relationships, but that it went beyond that, and that had nothing to do with why my partner and I shouldn't have rejoined. Yeah. And the kiss that we had, Avery wanted to make sure that they didn't compromise it because it was a love story. And at that time, they were doing a lot of things to be titillating in half-hour comedies and things. But this was actually an appropriate story to be told. And it had depth to it that was really serious about how she was taking this love she had from the past and trying to reclaim it. And that was shortchanging Jadzia, the humanoid, life experience. What was sad about it at the time was because it was seen very controversial, and when it aired on the East Coast at first, it consequently got preempted as people realized what the story was about. Affiliates took it off the air.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So it's amazing to think, though, at that time in the 90s that it was so controversial, they took it off the air, right? It's kind of remarkable. Yeah. It's not that long ago.
Yeah. We've come so far since then, right? Yeah. In part because of Star Trek, I think, trailblazing and being willing to tell those stories. Colin, obviously you were on the Next Generation first. What was it like launching Deep Space Nine in sort of the shadow of the Next Generation? Because they were on at the same time for a few years there.
It didn't feel like it was in the shadows so much of it. It felt like it was another extension of the franchise, and an interesting and exciting one, you know? Next Generation was a very slow burn as well, you know? When it first aired, there was resistance to it, simply because, you know, suddenly it's not Captain Kirk, it's Picard, and he's bald, and this and that, and he sounds English, and, you know, things like that. And that there was resistance to that. You know, people don't seem to like change.
Yeah.
So there was. It didn't feel so much. And I think the Next Generation was just beginning to sort of extend it to get its head of steam up when we came along. And then there was a similar resistance to us for the reasons we said. Oh, it was dark, it was this, it was that, it was on a station, it wasn't a ship, so it wasn't the same, you know. But it was, I mean, as far as we were concerned, I think it was a sort of it was a challenge. We really were up for it, weren't we? I mean, it was like kind of like, this is a well-written show. The pilot was, you know, was interesting, well-written, good characters. I mean, for you guys, these are new characters to develop, and you know, and all interesting. I mean, I was already kind of established from Next Generation. Yeah. So it was for us. It was for me anyway. It was very exciting.
Yeah. Nana, what were your initial impressions of Kira when you first got the script?
I called my manager and I said, I think there's been a mistake. This is a part for a man. I really did. And they said, no, they're looking for a woman. And I was like, oh my God, I want this role. I wanted it so badly. So my initial ideas of it were, I just gotta play this person.
Yeah, yeah. And she really made her mark as well, didn't she? I mean, and gender didn't matter, I think, regarding Kira ultimately, right?
It certainly didn't to me. It was this, she had a spectrum. She allowed herself emotions. She was angry when she was angry. She was wrong. She learned. I mean, to have that kind of agency, especially back in the 90s, for a woman, I was used to being the guy's girlfriend or wife or dead wife or, upset wife or,
Adjective wife.
Yeah. So this was like, what? She's not happy with the commander coming in and she dares to show it? What?
Yeah. Why did you think it was a role for a man when you first saw it?
Because of that. She was angry and she was resentful and she wasn't pandering to anybody. And obviously she had post-traumatic stress from her life. Although I didn't know that terminology then, I knew from what her backstory was that that's what was going on for her. And there was an arc. It took 7 years for her to calibrate herself to being in community.
Yeah, for sure. And they never backed away from it. And any of your characters, what they set out to do, I think, with them, as the show progressed each season, they didn't get scared off because maybe there were some naysayers, or they didn't say, oh, well, now Kira is gonna become adjective wife or whatever. Like they kept pushing forward, I think, with all of them, which is another reason why we love the show. Terry, some fans have noticed that you had a different makeup design, and I think it's like one promotional still that was released before the show even aired. Can you tell us what was the deal with the early Dax look, and why did it change?
Sure. On Next Generation, there was an episode with Gates and a Trill. And this Trill had a forehead that was different. Trills had a forehead. And it started like, I believe it started like underneath your eyebrows and it was built up, right? But Michael Westmore said, no, that's not going to look good on you. So he kept trying to reduce it. There was another complication while we were doing this is I was the last person hired and they were almost done filming the pilots, the 2-part. And so they're trying to rush this. He's trying to make it smaller. I'm going into Next Gen to have my makeup test done. So they finally, it looked like honestly, like a little rubber bump that looked like a bird, like how you just draw a bird. And we shot some of the stuff with that. And then after dailies, Carrie McCluggage said, we hired a beautiful woman. We hired her because she's beautiful. What did you do to her face? So back to the drawing board, Famke Janssen played a part on Next Gen and she had spots. And I believe, it's my understanding, she was offered the part of Dax.
Oh.
It didn't work out, gratefully for me, because I too was like, when I knew about the character, I was just like, oh my gosh, I want to play her so bad. This is so great to have something with something going on, right? Somebody who's deep and interesting. So at any rate, they tried to do the spots. We did a whole bunch of tests and finally got on to what they ended up doing. But wow. I think I was doing tests for like 2 weeks before we even shot me like out, it was a lot of pressure to suddenly meet everybody last and be like, I'm talking nonstop.
Would they not let you meet the cast until they had the final makeup? No, I guess not.
Oh no, I had, but it was odd because everybody else had started, right? So they had this camaraderie, everybody met each other and it was
It's like coming into first grade late.
Yes.
It's like, no, you want to start it together.
Yeah, and everybody's got their rhythm, and I hadn't worked for a long time. I'd done guest star parts, but not. And our sets were enormous. It was very intimidating.
The day's long.
The
days were long.
And you did 26 a year too, right? Which is crazy to think about now. So as the show progressed, they did make some tweaks in terms of they gave you a ship, they gave you a wharf, gave you a wharf specifically. Like, how did you guys react to those tweaks that were being made though as they were happening? Like, because it felt at the time like they were tinkering with the format a little bit. I guess let's start with Mrs. Worf.
Okay. It was fun for me because I'd met Michael before I got Star Trek. through a mutual friend. And so when he came on, it was like, oh, great, I can work with my friend, right? I was excited for this reason. And also, Ira Bear came up to me and said, you're going to pilot the Defiant, and we're going to make you more roguish. You're going to be fighting more, because I was doing kickboxing on my own. So there were a lot of exciting things for my character that made it a lot more fun for me too. I was coming into my own as an actress. I was feeling a lot more comfortable. And so these were big changes that were comfortable for me. I know that overall it was a shift that might have been more difficult for the guys, in particular Avery and Renee, you know, because they were sort of the guys in charge.
Right. Did you like having a ship?
I loved having a ship. I loved when I got to be in the chair of the Defiant. I remember Renee, I can see him standing over me because I was enjoying it so much, saying, you know, you're not actually piloting the ship. Do you know that, Nana? It's just like reality check. But it's like, no, I am. I'm in the chair. It meant so much to me to, you know, because if there was anyone that was my avatar in the original, it was Captain Kirk. I wanted to be Captain. I didn't want to be one of those women hanging on him. I wanted to be Captain Kirk. So that was, to be in the chair meant a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Colm, when did you start to realize the impact that the show and even your character were having on fans?
I think it was like kind of season 3, the show really started to find its feet and find an audience. And to like the changes and the tweaks you talked about there, at the time they all felt very much like they were just new opportunities. They were you know, opportunities to develop the show further in different directions. Like me getting married, for example, you know, suddenly gave us a whole domestic world to explore. And you know, to be the first wedding in space, I believe. You know what I mean. So each tweak, as you call it, was like a new opportunity. Yeah. To develop the show further in a different direction on the characters.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was, the chief had a whole domestic life that was new to Star Trek as well back then, right?
Yeah,
Because then he went on and he had kids, and and his like kid would turn into a cave woman in an episode here or there, things like that would happen. So, but that's a whole different segment. Yeah. So Star Trek Deep Space Nine is home to a wonderful cast of memorable characters, and now in Star Trek Fleet Command, you can recruit new officers thanks to the brand new Deep Space Nine storyline. Officers include an epic Sisko, a rare Kira, and a rare Miles O'Brien. But don't wait, download Star Trek Fleet Command on Windows PC, Android, and iOS to experience the Deep Space Nine storyline today. The Deep Space Nine story is packed with themes surrounding morality, war, and diversity. So I wanted to get back to the idea of Kira as really she was when we first met her, she was an ex-freedom fighter and a rebel. She was not used to the sort of Starfleet way of doing things. Can you talk a little bit about her journey from former rebel to freedom fighter to sort of, you know, attaché to this Starfleet organization that was very different from what she knew growing up, how that kind of just reflects the ideas and themes of Star Trek overall?
Well, again, I mean, first of all, to play a woman that has an arc, that has agency, was an amazing thing in itself. And to play someone who has war scars was interesting. And again, what Star Trek does best is examine these in ways that an audience can look at it and not feel like anything is being jammed down their throat, and it's entertaining to boot. So I think that her relationships with Odo, with the shapeshifter, with all these incredible relationships with Miles O'Brien, examining what that's like to carry someone else's child. All those issues in a woman that was allowed to make mistakes and grow and have dreams and goals of her own, not only for herself, but for her community, it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Terry, one thing I love about Dax is that she was so open-minded and willing to just kind of accept people as they were. At one point, she mentions that she's dating a guy who has a transparent skull, and you can see his brain through his forehead or something.
Lucky me.
How do you think Dax's sort of outlook reflects Star Trek as a idea?
Oh gosh, I think I just feel really fortunate, blessed that I got to portray somebody who was as old as she was, but yeah, to represent inclusion, acceptance, that we're always working towards not being judgmental of ourselves and others. And I think there's an element that because there was a symbiont that had lived the 7 lifetimes, there of course is the accumulation of life experience. But I also think just the character of Jadzia as the person that the symbiont was in, she was very different than Curzon. She was the one that was, having sexual relations with quite a few different people, and like not knowing the terminology for PTSD, we didn't have the terminology then for being pansexual. And I think that I really think that she was sort of ahead of her time in openness in this sort of expansive universe of just saying, I am really curious. I enjoy life so much that 350 whatever years isn't daunting to me. It's exciting and adventurous for me. So I think that was one of the best things about getting to play Dax, is actually not even realizing how important it was to represent the franchise in that way.
Yeah, for
until
sure.
I started to affect the fans, until you start to feel like people are coming up to you and saying, wow, I didn't feel accepted for my transgender, my orientation, until I saw your character and I went, oh, that's me. And whatever that is that you connected to Dax, that makes me feel just so proud as an actress that I got to tell that story.
Yeah. When did you guys start to hear from fans like that? Was it after you had already made the show, or?
First convention.
Okay.
First convention I went to. Do you remember yours? You'd been to them before, right? Yeah. So it was, we had our heads down working and had no idea. Heard some negative things, grumbling. They don't, it's not what they expected. It's not what the majority of people watching the show wanted. But then you go to a convention and you step out on stage and it's like, wait, I'm a rock star? What happened? What is this experience? It was like a wave crashing on you, and then hearing as they came up to the table to get an autograph what the character meant, what the show meant. I'll never forget a much older woman just with shiny eyes pulling up her shirt and showing me her numbers tattooed. Oh, wow. Because a lot of people, the Bajoran storyline resonated in that way. So in the Holocaust. So it was amazing.
Yeah. So one thing about the Chief column is that he, aside from him having a sort of a family life, which was kind of new for Star Trek, he also was, he was kind of more of a down-to-earth kind of guy, like the guy you'd want to go have a beer with. He was brilliant like all of his fellow officers, but he also seemed like more of a regular guy. How aware of that were you when you were actually working on the show? I mean, did you realize that you were sort of portraying another corner of Star Trek that we hadn't really seen before?
Yeah, very aware of it. I mean, it was always hammered home to sort of a wearying extent sometimes. The whole blue collar thing and I mean, I was fine with it. It wasn't a problem. That's who he was. But I just found it a bit odd the way people went on about it so much sometimes that it was. I mean, there were obviously all levels and echelons of on in an organization, like Starfleet, and he was. But there was I was very conscious of that, and the writers were conscious of it, I think, and the fans were conscious of that. He was like an everyday Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, and he would, of course, he had that great dynamic with Dr. Bashir where they became best buddies, and they were kind of there's a lot of humor that could be mined from that relationship as well, right? Now, of course, religion was another topic that Deep Space Nine delved into that Star Trek really hadn't before, and Kira was a big part of that. Can you talk a little bit about just how Kira and you as an actress were able to reconcile her religious faith with her past as a rebel who had lived through this war and done, difficult things?
I don't know that there was a reconciliation. There was these two aspects to her, and sometimes one was bigger than the other, but I don't think that there was, she may have thought there was a peaceful reconciliation, the character, that those two things go together. I, as the actor, had to stand back and allow her to have her ideas of that, but I certainly never reconciled it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, she is always struggling with it for all 7 seasons, really, right? Of course, the Dominion War was a big part of the show as well as we got further along. And there was a lot of great, memorable episodes there. But I wanted to ask, is there a particular, Terry, maybe we can start with you. Is there a particular aspect of the Dominion War story that really stuck with you or that you enjoyed working on?
What was really alarming is when we had the Jem'Hadar and they were addicted to the white. And that was really upsetting to me because I don't know why, and I could be completely off on this, but for my little take on it, it just sort of reminded me of growing up and having the Vietnam War happening as a kid and having lots of drugs and stuff around that whole arena and seeing it really affect an entire generation of people that went there and couldn't cope, but were sort of controlled by substances to get through it. I mean, I know it's not the same, but at the same time, that's what it made me think of, the sadness of that and how they didn't have any control over any of it. They were forced into it. Yeah,
sure. Yeah. And the Jem'Hadar are as well, right? I mean, that's
that's what I mean. Even though it looks a little different, but
yeah, definitely. Colm, do you have any particular Dominion War stories that you recall enjoying working on?
Not really, no. I mean, to me, it had sort of echoes because the Berlin Wall had just come down and all that. It had echoes of that kind of collapsing empire, and in that's the way I kind of saw it. I mean, that was the clearest parallel or relevance I could see of that storyline.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, Star Trek really was reflecting things that were happening in the real world at that time. I mean, it still does too on the new shows. And I think it always did such a great job of translating real world issues for people who maybe just think they're watching a show, and
seeing ideas seep in,
Yeah, exactly.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
So we're brainwashing the population.
Yes. We're converting them all. They're all going to be Trekkies before we're done with them.
Aren't they?
Aren't they already?
I think so.
We'll take on new crews. There's new blood out there.
Deep Space Nine also really delved into the sort of longer form storylines. Next Generation was doing episodic, in and out. Let's leave the planet by the end of the week. You guys were at Bajor and you were dealing with the wormhole, and every week something new. It was something new adding to that story. Nana, did that help you with the development of Kira? Do you think to be able to tell those longer form stories?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, then you can have an arc. Serialization was, I think it also was partly to blame for us not being watched so much. It was hard to find us. And then if you hadn't been watching, it was hard to catch up. Now, I mean, we were built for streaming. We were built for binge watching. And I think that's why there's a whole new big audience for the show. And now everybody's used to that form.
I also wanted to ask of you guys if there was a particular character relationship that really stuck with you, like Kira, for example. Is there? I know you had relationships with all the characters in different ways, but was there one that really, to this day, you really treasure?
My relationship with René Auberjonois' character, Odo, of course. I cherished the time on set I had with him. He was such an amazing actor. I got to know him as a friend after the show. And, you know, going to Europe he and his wife and my husband and I would spend time at the conventions and going through Europe. And I treasure that relationship. I also treasure a relationship, especially for the 90s, that started as a friendship, became romantic, but in love, they let each other go because their lives were on different paths. And I was happy that they allowed that.
Yeah, as sad as it was, yeah. Colm, how about you?
Well, I mean, my relationship with Sid obviously was written in that very particular way, and was great to play and enjoy to play. And I was hoping it would become romantic, actually. Never did.
Still could.
But
That's for the movie.
I think so.
We just got confirmation. Movie, Deep Space Nine movie.
And also with Avery. I mean, Avery was. Avery had a huge impression on me. He was to me, he was like this Renaissance man. You know, like he was an athlete, he was a musician, he was a tenured professor. You know, Ivy League college. He was a wonderful actor, and we had a lot of laughs together. Avery and I, we laughed a lot and sort of uncontrollably sometimes. And as a personal relationship, that was where my relationship with Avery was very important.
Sure, yeah. How about you, Terry?
Well, storyline, I would imagine that Worf would be the first thing on everybody's mind. And as a friend, that was really important because we worked through things together because we had so many scenes together. But I would also go back to Avery because he felt so much like a mentor to me. There were several, even in the pilot, there was a moment where he had to call me old man. But how it was written, there was something like I was supposed to like one up him in my response because I'd been Curzon. I had been his mentor. Well, and how the scene was playing, I just couldn't top him. And it was like my first real scene with him. So I took him aside and I said, I'm so sorry, Avery. I'm 28 and you're a little older than me. And you're a man and I'm only this 28-year-old woman. I can't do this. Would you please help me? And he sure did. He sure did. He did it in a different way. He played it differently. And I think that started a trust with us because I was brave enough to say, I need your help right from the get-go. And there were other times when we worked together and he directed me or when I felt like I wasn't quite coming up to the mark that he would take me aside and say, this is how you want to approach it, Terry. And then I had a lot of scenes where we hit head to head. It was like I felt like he was saying, you got this. And we just and it was so great because every time I accomplished something a little bit more, it helped me have a self-confidence I'd never had as an actress before or an actor.
Right. I love that.
So it helped me personally too.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
And now you can experience such storylines, like helping Kira calm tensions between the Bajarans and the Cardassians, assisting O'Brien after he's been hoodwinked by a thief, and of course, dealing with the arrival of the Dominion. In Star Trek Fleet Command, you can customize your own fleet, explore new worlds, and dominate the galaxy. Download free today. Available on Windows PC, Android, and iOS. Now, we're nearly out of time, but before we go, the IGN Twitter account sent out a request for some questions for you guys, and we got some good responses. So let's dig into those. First off, of all the characters in Deep Space Nine, who would you choose to have portrayed and why?
Captain Janeway.
There you go.
I know it's not Deep Space Nine, but Captain
That's
Janeway.
okay. Any character in Star Trek, we'll modify the question.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to think about it, but it would have to be no aliens are out because of the makeup.
No nose ridges, no spots.
No.
Okay. He was spoiled, wasn't he?
Yeah, we actually had a funny one with. I was just the other night. I was talking to somebody about it, and I remember Michael Dorn, who heroically spent like nearly 15 years in Klingon makeup, and would hate me. And I'd come in, like, he'd be already in the chair for 2 hours, and I'd come in and get a bit of powder on. Go, see how they're like, and you bastard, you bastard. And they wrote an episode then where Avery and I became surgically. Remember that one?
Yes.
They transformed us, and Dorn read this and went, yes, he's going to be a Klingon. It's brilliant. I was thrilled. But by the middle of the second day of that, I bitched about it so much. Michael was saying, get him out of that makeup. Never put him in it again. Please, just get him out. From the time they put the thing on here, I can't blink. I can't, my eyes. Look at my eyes. And then it was down to, look at me, look at these nails. Look at me.
I remember that. Look at me nails. I remember that. Oh my God.
Do they even do something to your nails?
Yeah, I don't remember. It was awful. So I would, that would be out.
You're happy with O'Brien?
Huh?
You're just happy being O'Brien?
Yeah, I think so.
How about you, Terry?
I don't know her character's name. Sonequa Martin Green.
Oh yeah, Michael Burnham. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. She's great. She's great. Yeah.
Because I love Sonequa so much. She just radiates this amazing energy, and so. I watched the first couple seasons of that for her, and she's amazing.
She's awesome. Yeah. Okay, let's see. What was the hardest scene you had to do in terms of emotional weight? Anyone?
There were a lot. There were a lot for my character. I think describing victims of the Bajorn Holocaust to Commander Sisko, that was one of the hardest for me to do. Yeah.
You guys have one?
Yeah, there was a lot of heavy emotional stuff for me in those episodes where I spent the 30 years in jail or whatever in solitary.
Yeah,
it was a bit like Count of Monte Cristo time.
Totally
chained to the wall.
Yeah, your imaginary friend or whatever.
Yeah. So that was pretty heavy duty stuff. Yeah.
Terry?
I would say probably just the first season was just personally.
Right, yeah.
Personally heavily emotional for me enough, trying to adjust to my new way of being with all that techno babble was probably stressful enough for me.
I thought you were going to say dating the guy with the translucent skull where you could see his brain.
Gratefully, we did not see him because the whole idea of that, Terry and Dax are not alike in that department.
Who was your favorite villain or adversary in Deep Space Nine?
Louise Fletcher. Louise, oh my God. Such a sweet nastiness.
Yeah. What about for the chief?
She was pretty, Louise was amazing. But I always enjoyed, what's his name?
Mark Alimo. I never think of him as a guest star. But
right.
he was.
Yeah.
So Gul Dukat. Right. Have to mention Gul Dukat.
Yeah.
Well, Gul Dukat was almost like what Q was for the Next Generation, John Delancey, right? Where he was there so often.
Right,
yeah.
I think of him as a regular character, yeah.
How about you, Terry?
Oh, well, Gul Dukat, he killed me.
He did.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get a real fighting chance there, did I?
We don't like that. We don't talk about that. So Deep Space Nine had a lot of serious, thought-provoking episodes, but this Twitter user is asking, what were your favorite light and fun episodes, comedy episodes?
Well, for me, there was a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff in the bar with Sid and Quark was that. It was very much sort of like having a laugh.
Yeah. And you guys would always be coming out of the holodeck dressed like
Yeah, exactly.
in the Revolutionary War gear or
yeah,
something.
Silly outfits, yeah. So they were always light and fun to play, you know. Yeah.
Terry?
I love doing all my fighting scenes. Those are so much fun, dancing with my batleth. But the trials and tribulations, that was getting to relive childhood. Yeah. Playing in the back of the elementary school, pretending we were on Star Trek. Yeah. But I got to actually do it. Yeah, that was great. I had too much fun every day of that episode. And it was me and Avery the whole time, so yeah.
Kira got to do comedy as well. I mean, she was obviously a heavy character, but she had a lot of fun at times.
Yeah, she did. Actually, when you said that, I thought of the show Fascination, where we had a virus where suddenly you were attracted to somebody and
everyone was in love with everyone.
Everyone
right?
was in love with everyone.
Yes, right.
And that was actually the first time I had one of those scenes with Siddig, and it was the first time we went, oh no. Although it wasn't acted on for a long time after that, there was an inkling of something once we played that scene.
Interesting, okay. People could Google for the rest of that story, I guess, right? Next question, was there a makeup job or wardrobe that really caught your attention on set? So not necessarily a main character or anything, but just like maybe even an extra that you just noticed?
The lizard people, the ones who had a head with like a lizard tail, those were amazing. Oh, yeah. I always wanted to have a relationship with one of those, you know? Yeah. So it wasn't always, hunky guys that Kira went with, but, a lizard head once in a while.
Yeah, Kira did go for the hunky guys mainly, right? She could have taken a cue from Dax with the lizard guys or the transparent skull guys.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah. How about you guys? Any makeup or wardrobe that you really stuck with you?
I always had the Ferengi, Cork, Armin's head always made me laugh.
You just like making fun of these guys who had to sit in the makeup chair.
Well, there's a bit of that too, yeah. But there's also a story about remember the '94 earthquake?
Oh God, yes.
And some of the people with the heavy makeup were in already, because the quake hit around before 6 o'clock in the morning, but they were already in the chair.
Or something. Yeah.
And Armin had the head on, but the studio shut down. Everyone told him to go home. Armin jumped in his car driving home. The lights were all out, and he came to Melrose and Vine. This is a true story. He came to Melrose and Vine. And the lights were flashing, and this guy stopped in the car and coming down Vine, and Armin was going, "Go ahead," and the guy's just like, They've landed, because and Armin forgot he had the butt head was on, It's hilarious.
The butt head. It was a butt head, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
What I always loved about him, though, Armin, in that makeup, is that he was always burning the camera if someone took a picture. It was like he was Cary Grant. Like he felt really handsome in that head.
Yes.
And I loved that commitment.
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe he was like the Cary Grant of the Ferengi, right?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And he was slick, wasn't he, as well?
Oh, very slick.
Yeah.
What about you, Terry?
Wonderful performance, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, no, just say I'm really grateful I wasn't a Cardassian because they didn't just have the head; it was the back, it was the shoulders, and I had the old age makeup for one episode that was Jake's episode where he ages.
Yeah,
and
Tony
Avery
Todd came in and played him as an adult, right? Yeah.
That was, I don't know if it happened for you when you had that Klingon makeup on. It was so itchy. Yeah, there was a point where I was like, get it off, get it off. Oh my goodness. I just can't.
And they can't just take it right off, right? It doesn't take like an hour and a half or something.
Well, there's and that stuff smells scary too. And just the smell of it.
Right.
Like when I had to kiss Michael Dorn, it was like, latex.
Okay, so this Twitter user asked, did Star Trek change how you looked at the world? I grew up with the original series and it changed my perception of what we can become.
Absolutely it did. I mean, you drop thoughts into your brain and live them and make them work for you, and it's going to shift you. Major Kira very much shifted the way I thought and the way I lived and what I thought was possible. It was like I was suddenly wearing much looser clothing, and I was allowed a broader spectrum of being, which didn't really work in the 90s. That was a kind of strange experience to be feeling like I had that, and then in real life, no.
Right, yeah.
No. But it's interesting now that so much of how she was has caught up not only with me, but the culture and the way people are trying to shift the culture.
Yeah, sure. What about you guys? Any way, did you feel like Star Trek changed your outlook at all?
No, I think it reinforced a lot of my, ideas I already had formed in that way, and maybe broaden them a bit. But I mean, it was a very progressive show. It really was. I mean, politically and socially and every way, it really, as you say, Nana, what we accept today, it's a very different environment we live in than 30 years ago, in terms of social acceptance. And it was very important. And as I say, for me, it kind of reinforced ideas I already held, which was great. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, anything to add?
Actually, I agree with both of you in terms of it expanding what I already had in mind, what I thought would work for me. I think I was young enough at the time, being 28, that I was sort of trying to formulate who I wanted to become. But playing Dax, definitely what Nana was saying, expanded my idea of who I was going to become, even permission to do that. And that might be a female in our society, the way America is. And I feel like I've grown into that. I keep working towards this progress and will continue to, in this trying to be much more accepting and loving. Those seem to be just parts of what becomes necessary in terms of loving yourself better. But all of those things about Dax has fed me, and I feel like I make mistakes and come back to that.
Sure.
And come back to that, right? So it's really about finding the path of forgiveness, and I think that's a lot of what I played as Dax. I get to be as me now, and I don't think I made the connection so much in some of the mistakes I made.
Right.
Terry, but having this persona that I played for so long, like Nana was saying, it gets reinforced in your brain that you're doing it every day.
Right.
You're a hero, but we're a hero to other people. We become heroes to ourselves, to getting to play these magnanimous characters.
Sure, yeah.
I wanted to go back to one of your original questions. What was so good about, what did Star Trek do right? And Andrea Kindred was, I think, the executive assistant to Gene Kuhn on the original show. And I recently got to interview her, and she said something that I think was so important. Someone asked her, what was the best thing about Star Trek? And she said, it was entertaining. So it allowed a huge number of people in to listen to new ideas and concepts. I wish some shows remembered the entertaining part.
Yeah.
You do need to welcome people in.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have, but please, a huge thank you for Nana Visitor, Colin Meaney, and Terry Farrell